Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto gained control over death and harem with multiple girls part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Cinder stirred slowly. Shards of glacial pain stabbed through her good eye as she blinked away the cobwebs shrouding her vision, to no avail. She may as well have been wading through water for all it mattered. Try as she might, her strength failed her, leaving her world swimming in and out of focus despite her best efforts to master herself. A slow blink sent a jagged spike of pain through her temple and elicited a raw gasp from the wounded maiden. Damn it. Everything hurt. Even the merest act of breathing threatened to send her body spiraling down into paroxysms of fresh agony and leave her paralyzed where she lay. The same could not be said for her surroundings. In hindsight, the room in which she found herself couldn't call the room anything but primitive. 4 thatch walls topped by a straw roof and a rickety wooden frame. Even the floor itself was dirt. This wasn't a house. It wasn't even a cottage at that. This was some sort of shack, and her nose curled at the sight of it. Were it not for warmth of a small fire pit in the center of the room, she would have thought it a hovel. As things stood, the flickering firelight cast an eerie glow across their room, playing tricks with the shadows, sending fingers of darkness trailing across the soul sheet shielding her bare skin. Wait a minute. What the hell is this? She yelped. Why? A snarl, the fall maiden jerked upright, flailing in her fury. Only then did her memories finally return. She almost wished that they hadn't. Cinder remembered now, because she had been beaten. Badly. A flood of recognition came rushing back, bringing with it the bitter pang of humiliation. Yes. There it was. That's right. She remembered. Raven. She'd made the mistake of goading her into a fight. One she wasn't prepared to win. Indeed, Cinder'd chosen her fight poorly and promptly paid the price for her folly. For all her might, she still tasted defeat. Near the end of their duel, Raven had broken one of her leg and blasted a hole in her stomach, frozen her, then thrown her down a chasm. If it hadn't been for the water, she might have died. Even then she'd been on death's door. Somehow, she had clung on long enough to find an exit and haul herself back out into daylight. Her last memory consisted of dragging her broken body across the road in the rain before the blackness claimed her. Now she was lying here in a stranger's bed, trapped in some infernal hut in God's new where. For a fleeting instant she thought one of her allies had retrieved her. Someone had certainly gone to great length to bandage her wounds. When she glanced down she saw her broken leg sheathed in a cast, while much of her bloodied stomach and chest were likewise wrapped in a sheath of fresh white bandages. With her aura at an all-time low, this rudimentary treatment would have to suffice for the time being. Still, who had done this? Emerald and Mercury didn't know a lick about medicine. Hazel, even less so. In her eye, that one was a brute good for little more than destruction. Which brought Cinder to her next line of inquiry: who the devil did this? Inhaling a second time now brought with it a faint aroma, one she vaguely recognized as stew, which in turn caused her recovering stomach to offer a plaintive growl. She scowled at it, to no avail. Traitor. It only growled louder still. Sure enough, her gaze alighted upon a pot at the edge of the strange hearth, filled to the brim with vegetables and assorted meat. At least, Cinder hoped that was meat. The dim flames afforded precious little in the way of light at the moment, leading her to believe the hour was late. Her stomach protested once more, muscles threatening to clamp down as she tried to stand. Worse, her bad leg protested viciously when she attempted to put her weight on it, leaving her at something of an impasse. Still, she did have her arms. She was just considering stealing it when someone spoke. Been a while since I've seen someone with an arm like that. A man's dry, cracked voice arose from the dark. You're a strange one. All at once Cinder realized she wasn't alone. Instinctively, She arched her back and searched for a weapon. Nothing came. Now, the voice soothed. There's no need for violence. I come in peace. You'll leave in pieces. Cinder snarled, weakened aura flaring. Braver souls have tried. At first she hadn't seen her host. If only because he stood with his back to her and his clothes blended with the blackness. But she heard him now. She certainly heard him when he tossed another log into the fire. The faint scratch of a mortar and pestle captured her attention for a moment before its owner finally laid his tools to rest and turned to face her. Shadow and flame seemed to dance across his quiet countenance, briefly hiding it from view before he stepped into the light. Still, it's good to see you're awake. The barest beginnings of a smile tugged at his face as he glided to her side. I was beginning to think you wouldn't wake up. A waspish retort leapt to her lips, only to die a withering death when she beheld her host's countenance. The first things she noticed were the eyes. While the left stood blue as the ocean depths, the right shone an eerie rimmed shade of unholy violet. She found herself gazing at a young man. At least, he appeared young behind that absurdly long beard of his. Filthy, too. Matted golden hair framed whiskered cheeks alongside a face smudged with dirt and ash, before tapering down his back in a jagged spiky mane even more untamed than the wilds in which she found herself. Clad in little more than a dirty black cloak, she glimpsed faded traveling leathers beneath, their color leached away by time and use. They might have been orange, once. Still, those mismatching eyes were bright and sharp and they followed her when she attempted to sit up. Where am I? She challenged, clutching the sheet to her chest. Who are you? You're in my home, girl. His mouth quirked in a small smile. I'll thank you to show an old man some respect. As to who, well. Slim shoulders rolled in a half-hearted shrug. I tend go by, doctor, these days. Old man, or quack when one of my patients gets rowdy. I'd prefer a name. Cinder pursed her lips. He tilted his head. And I'd prefer you sit back down. You'll open your wound. Reluctantly, she did as she'd been bade, though not without hesitation. Something about his words stuck with her, though. Old. He'd called himself old. This blonde buffoon didn't look a day over 20 at best. His face was unlined and tanned, not a single wrinkle to be seen. If it weren't for the hair and that long, dragging beard of his, she might have dismissed his words outright. But his eyes told another story, one she was almost afraid to hear. What manner of fool called themselves old when they clearly were not? Was he made insane? Perhaps. He certainly had the mad hermit look going for him and her stomach chose that moment to growl again. Hungry, are we? The doctor favored her with a laugh. All right, then. He turned his back to her without a second thought, dismissing her as no threat. I found you on the road and tended to your wounds. He strode back to the fire and began to ladle a fresh helping of stew into a wooden bowl from a nearby pot, a few waning shadows flickering from the fire over his back. I brought you here for treatment. That was, 3 days ago. 5. You've been out for quite some time, I'm afraid. Was it her imagination, or right eye seemed to burn just a bit brighter as he spoke? Surely not. You talk in your sleep, you know. A lone blue eye gazed at her over his shoulder. Might want to do something about that. Heat rose to Cinder's cheeks but she banished it with a snarl. I take it you expect payment. She scoffed softly. He merely offered her the bowl and a spoon. Kindness is its own reward. Here. Cinder snatched them out of his grasp, swept the spoon through the broth, and jammed it into her mouth. For his part, the doctor didn't look offended by her rudeness. He only favored her with a small smile and turned to fetch a bowl for himself. The fall maiden paid him no more mind than she would an annoying aunt. Instead she turned her focus to the foot in front of her and pushed all thoughts of him from her mind. Why should she? He may have tended her wounds, but she felt she didn't owe him in the slightest. He only breathed at this very moment because she was feeling merciful. And, well, hungry. It's Naruto, by the way. Cinder felt her ears perk up. Just a touch. What? That's your name. Ha. She actually laughed at him for it. All things considered, the stew was rather good, if a tad too warm for her liking. Without thinking, Cinder moved to cool it with her maiden powers. Nothing came. Annoyed by her weakness, she tried again. Once more, she failed in this simple task. Her lone eye widened. Wait. A pit of dread opened in Cinder's stomach, gaping wide to swallow up all she'd ever known. When she tried to reach for her strength again, for the power of the Fall Maiden, her power, the power she'd fought so hard to claim, she found nothing. Only the faintest embers of her former might in her semblance, smoldering quietly. At first, she felt only confusion. That didn't make any sense. Her powers weren't merely depleted, they were gone entirely. Vanished. In place of that all-consuming might, Cinder felt nothing but an empty void when she reached for them. Worse than that, the bowl tumbled out of her hands and clattered to the floor, appending its contents into the dirt. Where's my power? She barely choked the words out. What happened to my power? Gone, I'm afraid. The blonde answered. You were quite dead when I found you. Her gaze snapped back to the hermit with laser-like focus. What are you talking about? Did I stutter? Having finished his meal, the blonde doctor had turned his back her and begun to work on another concoction of some sort, grinding the mortar against the pestle as he spoke with firm, precise movements in spite of hysteria. You know, I had a rather difficult time reviving you at all. You should be grateful. Cinder scarcely heard him. No, this couldn't. No. Her hands, human and grim alike, tore at her hair as she shook her head. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. And yet it was. No matter how she tried, her strength never came. Only her semblance and her own aura remained. Those would recover in time. But the power of the Fall Maiden was gone. Forever. Merely thinking of it was enough to send her back into a spiral of despair. Her heart skipped a beat, then another. Another still. Panic overtook her as she looked this way and that, frantically seeking an escape from what she knew to be the truth. Stop. Try to think. Don't panic. You can get it back. But it was so very easy to panic. Salem would never forgive her for this. Not only had she failed to secure the relic, but she'd lost her power. Without it, they couldn't access the relic at Beacon. Assuming it was ever found. She felt small without her maiden powers. Tiny. Weak. Just as she'd been, before. It made her want to tuck her knees against her chest and curl into a ball. In a rare moment of weakness, he did just that. No, she wasn't weak. She still had her arm. Her skills. Her training. Her semblance. She wasn't weak. No, not weak. Never weak. Not again. If the power wasn't here, wasn't with her, that meant it sought out someone else. Her last thoughts hadn't been of Raven. For all the pain and humiliation the Spring Maiden had inflicted upon her, she still hadn't been in Cinder's final thoughts. No, her last spiteful recollection had been of that girl. That damned girl. Little Red Ruby Rose. Something broke deep inside of Cinder. It was known that a maiden's power went to those she held in her final thoughts. Salem had all but drilled the knowledge into her. It had been a pivotal point in acquiring them from Amber in the first place. But now she had been defeated, she'd even died for a period of time, if Naruto was to be believed. One only person was in her final thoughts. The power had likely gone to her. Ruby. Freaking Rose. Ever since her ignominious defeat at Beacon, that insipid little girl was always lurking at the forefront of Cinder's mind. Which meant, no, that was impossible. Destiny couldn't possibly be so cruel as to do this to her. But it was. And it had. Her hands went limp at her sides as this awful realization dawned. Then her entire world went red as she pictured the huntress's insufferable face, imagined her smiling at her, no, laughing at her, that blasted girl, that damn brat. Fear and wrath writhed inside her like twin snakes, threatening to swallow her whole. And something, quite simply, broke. Someone was screaming. It took Cinder several seconds to realize it was her. She was still screaming when 5 firm fingers knifed into the side of her neck and knocked her out. And there, from that single solitary moment, her entire world began to change. But for good or ill, who could say? Don't worry about Naruto's messy appearance, he'll be back to normal soon enough. I think I just broke Cinder. Before anyone asks, again, I've already written this out. It's merely a matter of fine-tuning chapters and then posting them. You can expect a pure RWBY story soon, which has also been written in advance. Well, let's hope that one doesn't get me murdered. It's going to be a different take, to say the least. That's right, she perished and lost her maiden powers. It's strongly hinted that she was revived by the Rinnegan after that fact. On to add insult to injury, those powers went to little Miss Ruby Rose. Time will tell if Cinder takes this chance to reflect upon her fate or, well. She's never taken defeat well, has she? You'll have to read on to find out her fate, won't you? So let's clarify some things real quick. This iteration of Naruto, due to circumstances that will be explained, had no choice but to seal Kagaya inside himself to prevent her from running amok. That is not a good idea under normal circumstances. Unfortunately, in doing so, he accidentally gave himself immortality on the level of Salem and then some. He can't age, nor can he die. These days he's just a humble sage trying to eke out a living while searching for a way to both destroy himself and the crazy goddess inside of him. He left his world to keep it safe. Because Kagaya wants out, and if she has her way, the world of Remnant is in for hell. If folks don't like this, I'll delete it in a day or so. So in the immortal words of Atlas. Review. Would you kindly? Here's a preview. Of course, I haven't forgotten Ruby and the gang. Preview. Weiss. Halp. My hands are on fire again. Hatha thought. Make it stop. Ruby. Blake twitched. Is she going to be alright? Don't worry. Young barely looked up. My baby sis, is tough. I'm more worried about Weiss. A distant explosion drew a wince from all parties present. Kiro palmed his face. I need a drink. Coward. You have all this power, yet you refuse to use it. Sometimes the best action is inaction, came the reply. I chose the latter. Then you're a fool, Naruto Uzumaki. Power is meant to be used, not hoarded away. He rebuffed her with a gentle sigh. We've been over this. You do not want the gifts I have to offer. Of course I do. You think hoarding power means you'll have it forever. Her lone eye regarded him venomously as he continued to change her bandages with limpid sincerity. But it just makes the rest of us hungrier. And I refuse to starve. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Stop being melodramatic and let me do my job. Cinder spat at his feet in mild derision, but didn't refuse him when he began to wrap a fresh poultice around her waist. Her lone eye never left him, watching every moment until he finally completed his task. The moment he did, she tried to jerk away from him, only for him to seize her human hand in his. For a moment, just a moment, the tan flesh of his palm gleamed a ghastly white. You think you know power. You think you could bear my burden and survive. You know nothing. The words escaped him in a low snarl as his fingers tightened around her heel. Salem. Grimm. Don't make me laugh. White eyes regarded her with the weight of 1,000 worlds, and still, he didn't relent. I could crush your master and lock her away in an instant, seal her in a place so cold and dark that she'd never see the light of day. Quote. Just like that, he released her, the ghastly pallor fading from his visage as he smiled. But if I did that, I'd unleash something far worse on this world. You have people who care about you. For instance, Cinder. As if waiting for that very moment, the door leading to the hut crashed open, spilling daylight into the darkened room. Not a heartbeat later, a teary green and tan blur shot across the room to cannon into her chest. The sage favored her with a dry look that spoke volumes. Gods, she wanted to burn him alive. But where had Emerald come from? In the end, his smile answered her. I never said you were my only patient. Ruby Rose was on fire. Quite literally at that, she'd woken from a dream in the middle of the night and found herself engulfed in flames. Still half asleep, the pajama-clad girl didn't realize what was going on. Not at first. Her first assumption was just that, I'm still dreaming, right? This should be a dream. Yeah, gotta be a dream. Nothing else made sense. She only knew that her body didn't hurt anymore. If anything, the flames felt downright pleasant. Like gentle hands wrapping around her sore muscles, bringing with them untold warmth. As if she were hugging a long-lost friend. Or were the flames hugging her? She wasn't sure. Her head was still foggy from the battle at Haven, yet she'd never felt lighter. But it felt so very nice, so Ruby didn't really care. Alas, the same could not be said for her sheets. Nor her bed. Or the rest of her room. When the scent of smoke finally reached Ruby's nose, reality was only half of a step behind. Which is to say, it slapped her right upside the head and then some, pulling her out of her daze like an angry Nevermore on the hunt. Smoke was bad. Fire. Also bad. Very bad. She didn't feel any of it, and the fire was leaving her pajamas alone for some reason, but everything else. Then came the panic. Weiss. Weiss. She cried, flailing spectacularly. Help. My hands are on fire. My room is on fire. Ruby. A muffled cry greeted her. What in the world? She'd barely gotten the words out before frantic footsteps resounded from the other room, followed by the door to said room crashing open. To her credit, her partner looked about as lively as she felt, which is to say she was clad in little more than a white shift and looked like death warmed over. Though her hair did look really pretty with it being down and all. No. Bad Ruby. Focus. Fire bad. She must have been in a right state too, because Weiss looked about ready to faint. Her eyes bulged as she beheld the elemental maelstrom. What did you do? Hatha thought. Well, not hot, but still. What's going on? Make it stop. You. Ruby. How are you even doing this? I don't know. Ruby whined. She wanted it to cool off. She didn't want to burn her room down. Everyone was going to wake up at this rate, and that meant everyone would stare and nananano. Remarkably, Ruby's newfound powers responded to her emotions. A wave of biting cold jutted from her open hands, causing the temperature to plunge. Perhaps a bit too rapidly. Sure enough, the fire gutted out, but in its absence, ice proved just as quick to sprout. Unfortunately, her emotions were also running a touch too high to be controlled. Sure enough, one of those icy blocks nailed Weiss right in the gut. Ruby had half of a heartbeat to wince in pity for her partner's plight. Then the poor girl flew out of the doorway like she'd been shot out of a slingshot and collided with an only just now arriving John. The impact knocked them straight through a wall as if it were made of wet cardboard. Woo-oh. Sorry. They'd be alright, wouldn't they? Just like that, the storm guttered out in her grasp, leaving the girl to gawp at the mess she'd made. Ruby Rose could have died of embarrassment at that very moment. She wanted to. But at least her room wasn't on fire anymore. That was good, right? Everything was alright. She just had to calm down and think in complete sentences. My hands are sparking. Was that thunder she heard outside? Oh God. Her panic surged and the golden glow in her palms only intensified, hearkening to her panic as she began to hyperventilate. And then Ozpin was simply there. At least, Ruby assumed it was Ozpin in control. Oscar's eyes simply didn't glow gold like that, even on a good day. Ruby tried to speak, tried to warn him to stay back, he'd get hurt, but the wind swallowed her words. It didn't matter. As she looked on in quiet terror, he strode to her side, reached out and took hold of her hands. Gloved fingers closed on hers, curling around her trembling palms. His serene expression wove a tiny thread of hope back into her heart. Slowly, carefully as not to spook her, the young man knelt before her. "Breathe, Miss Rose," he instructed her calmly, somehow making himself heard over the storm. "Find your center." "I don't know how," she wailed. "Yes," he said, "you do." Ruby did. Inhaling slowly, the huntress scrunched up her brow, wrinkled her nose, and willed herself to focus. Right. Center. Happy thoughts. Young. Mom. Dad. Weiss. Blake. Much to her delight, that was all the catalyst she needed to find her center. In due time the faint tingling sensation vanished from her hands and her twitching fingers came under her control once more. A small, tentative smile touched her mouth when she looked up. She found the rest of her friends waiting for her in the ruins of her ROM. Well, most of them. John and Weiss were still somewhat absent. Because reasons. Why was Uncle Kiro looking at her like she'd grown a second head? Or three? Ruby. Those powers. What powers? Ruby hiccuped spectacularly, bouncing from foot to foot. I don't know what's going on. Ozpin favored her with a small, strange smile. I believe we've found ourselves a new fall maiden. Everyone squawked. Ruby simply squeaked. Wait. Cinder held the powers of the fall maiden. Everyone knew this. If they'd gone to her, didn't that mean Cinder was dead? Wait. She knew that. They all did. They'd assumed her dead days ago during the Battle of Haven. But if the power just came to her now, oh. The proverbial lightbulb all but snapped into existence over her head. Which meant Cinder had only died recently. Which also meant she'd survived. Been alive. And Ruby had been in her final thoughts. That kinda made sense. A twisted, awful sort of sense, but sense nonetheless. Blake blinked, scrubbing at her eyes with the back of a hand. Is she going to be alright? Young barely looked up. My baby sis is tough. I'm more worried about Weiss. Wait. The faunus's ears twitched in mild concern. Has anyone seen her? A distant crash drew a wince from all parties present and absent. Ruby rose. Your head is me nay. Kiro palmed his face. I need a drink. Ruby yawned sheepishly. Oops. 00000. This man was absolutely insufferable. Cinder came to this inimitable conclusion only a week into her stay. 7 days after she caught a fever and screamed herself hoarse yet again. Thankfully her vocal cords were quick to snap back from this mishap in short order. Her body was not. Every day spent in bed served as a harsh reminder of just how frail she'd become, of how she had to depend on others to survive while her aura struggled to restore her ruined body to its terrifying prime. Losing her maiden powers hadn't merely exhausted Cinder, it had hurt her. She was weaker now than she'd ever been. Even her semblance felt smaller somehow, reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. To make matters worse, her host treated her as one would a sickly child. Every act, no matter how kind, shredded her pride to pieces. She could have killed him. She should have. She wasn't that weak. Not yet. There were times when her temper slipped its leash, when she found that she couldn't walk without aid. Couldn't even move more than a few stumbling steps by herself. When she tried, she had fallen spectacularly and tore open the stitches in her stomach. The pain had been agonizing and led to another bout of healing and herbs alongside other foul-tasting medicine. It taught her a touch of humility. Humility that burned her more than any flame. Despite all her pride and rage, Cinder Fall simply could not force her body to recover faster. Thus, for the first time in many years, she found herself forced to rely on a stranger once again. One who forced her to eat all manner of ghastly things, one who waited on her hand and foot, all without a single complaint. And so she observed him. At first it was solely out of boredom. Though Naruto had given her a book or two to read as she convalesced, Cinder had quickly consumed his limited collection. Soon enough she demanded more, and to her initial surprise, her host provided cold comfort at best, but she'd take it. Her body might atrophy a bit as she healed, but she refused to let her mind wither. When she wasn't reading, she was watching. Judging his every step, every bit of movement he made, noting his comings and goings whenever she could. She learned much. For starters, they weren't as isolated as she'd initially believed them to be. Nor was Naruto the mere doctor he claimed to be. He was more than that. Much more. She soon discovered they were in something of a rural village of a sort, not quite a slum, but not a town either. Not a day went by when someone didn't come begging to the doctor's door. Be it for a simple salve, healing, or even a meager bit of advice, he was always there to provide something to someone who needed it. Once he even lent a child the very cloak off his back. Cinder was uncertain how to feel about these inexplicably displays of kindness. Naruto gained nothing from them, beyond the goodwill of his patients. Goodwill did not fill one's coffers. Goodwill did not fill a hungry belly, no matter how many you helped. And by the gods, did these people need everything? Insipid fools. Were they even capable of fending for themselves? How did he attend to so many tasks at once and not fall apart? How did he function with so many people relying on him? Cinder soon had her answer, because very next evening he performed magic before her very eyes. At least, she assumed it to be magic. What else could it be? How else could one duplicate oneself? Or breathe fire? At first she mistook it for a semblance of some sort, but no, this was too complex. Arriving in a plume of smoke, the duplicate he'd created snapped off a snarky salute as it received its orders. The command given, it then snatched up a bow, darted out of the house, and returned not 5 minutes later with a dead buck slung over its shoulder like a sack of flour. Not an hour after that, and they had it for supper. A meal that was somewhat expedited by him breathing fire to cook the damn deer in the first place. "Oh no, I'm no huntsman," he answered when she tried to grill him over their hearty dinner of venison and potatoes. "Just a bit different." Different. Cinder snorted as she cut into her meat with ruthless efficacy and began to chew it. "That hardly describes you." "Fair point to the lady in red." The doctor yielded with a sigh to ward off her suspicion. "Very different, then." They chose to eat in stoic silence a moment more, neither willing to speak for a time, lest they broach the subject further. The fire pit crackled quietly in the center of the room, casting dancing shadows across their faces in roguish glow. Cinder took the opportunity to observe him again. His violet eye seemed to shimmer like the stars in the dark, while the blue remained just as calm and placid as ever. He was hiding something. She knew it. Just not what. Uncertainty gnawed at her like a nest of maggots as she ate. Not for the first time, she was glad to have procured new clothes for herself. Granted, the simple red tunic and breeches she wore wouldn't have been her first choice, but it at least allowed her to hide her scars and preserve her modesty, if not her sanity. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "You're not a necromancer or something, are you?" she asked at last. "Hardly. You're healing well, in any case," Naruto retorted, deflecting further questioning with all the bluntness of an Ursa. "I should be able to take the stitches out soon and get rid of that cast. You might even be ready to go outside tomorrow." As she looked on, the faintest green glow coated his right hand, gone almost before she could truly hope to glimpse it. She wasn't entirely certain what he meant by that, but if it meant her freedom and expedited her recovery, she was more than willing to give it a try. A thought occurred to her, then. "If you can heal me quickly, why didn't you do so earlier?" she snapped. A blonde brow rose again. "You weren't ready. You still might not be. Your body's part Grimm, it won't react well." "Me? Not ready?" Cinder slammed her fists against the table with a snarl. "Who decided that? I decide such things and I say I'm ready. You're incredibly stubborn. I hope you know that. the blonde continued as he polished off the last of his meal. Most would be bedridden by the injuries you sustained. Yet here you are, up and about, telling me to hurry and cure you. I'm not sure if that's amazing or damn foolish. With those words her temper cooled, if only a touch. Of course. She scoffed. I'm a survivor. It'll take more than this to kill me. So it would seem. Naruto dabbed at his bearded face, only to frown at some minor irritation. TCH. Maybe I should shave. Cinder couldn't help but preen a bit at his praise. Backhanded though it was. After taking such a brutal bruising, her ego was eager for compliments. Starving for recognition, she wanted to prove her worth to someone, anyone really. To show that she was above the common rabble. Remind herself that she had purpose. Worth. Or she would, once she ripped back her powers from that girl's corpse. That brat was probably even now training, learning to control her gifts. Stolen gifts. Once she retrieved her powers, no one would dare question her again. Sensing her negative thoughts, her grim arm spasmed. She clutched at it angrily and willed it to be still. Say, does that make you a zombie now that I've revived you, then? Naruto queried suddenly. Her wooden plate now empty sailed across the table at his face. To his credit, the sage didn't bat an eyelash. Instead he nimbly caught the dish and whisked it back onto the table where she'd first snatched it. Yet again she found her opinion of him called into question. Naruto claimed not to be a huntsman, yet he possessed absurd reflexes and a host of other unnatural abilities. Not to mention the fact that he'd quite literally brought her back to life. Normal people didn't do that. Huntsmen couldn't do that. Hell, she wasn't even sure Salem could bring back the dead. Could she? Right, then, Naruto declared, sensing the sudden shift in her mood. Time for bed, I think. Cinder drew back. I'll get there myself. I don't need your help this time. No, you really can't, came the retort. You know that. Her lone eye narrowed. Naruto, I will end you. Bah, he scoffed. Empty threats. Cinder tried to shrink back when he stood up and circled around to her side of the table, knowing full well what was coming next. As always, she found herself powerless to prevent it, much less escape. Lashing out with her semblance did no good anymore. She'd given up after the first day of that. In short order he swept his arms beneath her legs, pulled her into his chest, and carried her back to her cot. By all rights, he carried Cinder like a princess. That was the problem. This was inane, excruciating, humiliating. Fear me, damn it. Gentle laughter rumbled in his chest. Right now, you're about as terrifying as wet kitten. Cinder certainly hissed like one. Oh, for the love of stop carrying me. I'm not going to die if I take a few steps. No, that's not what concerns me at the moment. Naruto hummed as he laid her back down on the cot. Foolishly, Cinder took the bait hook, line and sinker. In a fit of pique she twisted her hips and kicked out at him with all her might. Her cast cracked him upside the head. Again, she may as well have kicked a Beowulf for all the damage she did. Her host only arched an eyebrow and she found herself forced to slump in defeat. Fine. The words escaped her in low growl. What the devil's bothering you, then? Too late, she realized she'd given him an opportunity. Bastard even started to count on his fingers. Your attitude, anger, and your. That does it. Out. Her pillow sailed right at his head like a cruise missile and promptly found itself snared to be placed beneath her cast. He straddled the bed beside and began to check her bandages, leaving her to cross both arms before her bosom and sulk impotently. She thought about killing him. It should have been easy. He was certainly close enough. All she had to do was reach out with her grim arm and snap his neck. She knew it wouldn't work this time, just as it hadn't before. She'd already broken his neck before. Any wound she inflicted on him healed instantly. Any aggression on her part would be simply result in laughter and yet another round of drinks. Would you like your eye back? At first, the question floored Cinder, if only because it came out of nowhere. Instinctively, her hand flew to the ruined side of her face to cup it as she turned away from him. Her hair still hid the scar, but the marks there served as a constant reminder of her wound. She didn't like to think about it, about her wounds, or what she'd been forced to become. His inquiry threatened to stir up old memories. One's best left forgotten. Bullshit. She spat the word as though it were poison. What are you playing at? Why offer me this now? Because you look miserable. Blast him. That explained absolutely nothing. Infuriating man. She forced a smile. I see. Do you expect me to repay you with my body? Is that it? He yanked the pillow out from under her leg and smacked her upside the head. Much to Cinder's surprise, it hurt more than any slap. What was that for? For being an idiot. Naruto snapped without any preamble. Do you want my help or not? She did. More than anything. She'd never admit it aloud. Her traitorous heart had leapt at the idea of being restored to some semblance of her former glory. To admit as much would be the same as placing herself in his power. He wanted something from her. He had to. Everyone wanted something. The alternative terrified her. If there truly was someone in this rotten world who only sought to help others, who sought no reward or means of payment, then what did that make her? She'd lived by her creed, trampling others underfoot to get what she wanted. This man was the opposite of her in every way, shape, and form, a being who contradicted her in all but challenged her on every level. She couldn't take it, couldn't admit it, could barely even speak. In the end, she managed a stiff nod. Then grit your teeth. This is going to hurt. With that, he laid his right hand on her ruined eye. Cinder had just enough time to glimpse his marked palm before her world went white. I don't feel anything. Her voice betrayed her. Naruto would later explain that it wasn't simply a matter of healing her. That he'd been essentially forced to revitalize dead skin, her scars make her blood to circulate in an area long since dead. He'd actively regrown her eye in its socket and that. Her body didn't know any other way to respond to this marvel beyond base instinct. He hadn't been joking. This pain went beyond what she'd experienced at Beacon, if only because it focused on a single locus, a singular point. There was no escape from it. And so she screamed, over and over again, until her voice finally failed. At first, it tried to reject what it viewed as a foreign object, which in turn ratcheted the pain tenfold. Who could say how much time passed? Seconds, minutes, hours. Quite suddenly, the pain vanished. And she could see. Cinder blinked. Where? A shadow shifted in her peripherals. Welcome back. Naruto's gruff voice greeted her. Again. She glimpsed him at the foot of her bed, changing her bandages. She rose, slowly at first, struggling to make her body respond the way she wanted to. Everything hurt. Dimly, she realized must have blacked out at some point. Because the gentle light of day filtered through the roof, leaving her to squint against it as nocturnal predator might its own shadow. She felt like death. No, worse than death. Her skin slicked in stale sweat, her throat burned itself hoarse. But she could see. With both eyes. She didn't realize it at first. All the world felt wrong. After viewing it through a single lens for so long, she almost couldn't quantify it. Why was her face wet? Oh, gods. She wasn't crying, was she? No, absolutely not. She hated such weakness. The man tending to her was anything but, and her curiosity would no longer be denied. Who are you, really? Naruto twitched. Just a touch. As I've said, I'm just a humble doctor, no one important. Cinder latched onto him like a starving woman would their meal. No. She swept her grim arm at him in a fit of pique. No excuses. Tell me. An eye is a small matter. Her doctor deflected. It's something I've done before. You should rest. And you should tell me the truth. Now. She clawed at his face, though the words tasted ashen in her mouth. Look at you. She jabbed a bandaged finger against his chest. You have all this power, yet you refuse to use it. You can heal wounds, recover from any injury, bring back the dead. You could rule this world. Yet here you hide in a hut, helping people, helping me. Why? Sometimes the best action is inaction, came the reply. He wouldn't look at her. I chose the latter. Lies. He was taking action by helping her and the people of this village. That wasn't inaction in the least. Then you're a fool, Naruto Uzumaki. Cinder growled back aside. Power is meant to be used, not hoarded away. So you've told me. He rebuffed her with a gentle sigh. We've been over this. You do not want the gifts I have to offer. Of course I do. You think hoarding power means you'll have it forever. Her restored sight regarded him venomously as he continued to change her bandages with his quiet, limpid sincerity. But it just makes the rest of us hungrier. And I refuse to starve. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Stop being melodramatic and let me do my job. Why you? Do you have any idea what it's like to never be good enough? He didn't answer her, so she pressed on, words scorching her throat. To be used and abused every moment of your life. Every second of his silence stabbed her like a blade, bringing her further and further to the edge. To be thrown out into the street and told that you're no one. Nothing. I fought my way out of that hell. I earned that power. I did things you couldn't possibly imagine to obtain it. I made a deal with the devil herself. Still, he refused to look at her. Damn him. Damn him to hell for all of this. And when I finally gained that power, when I finally claimed that which was so rightfully mine, it was taken from me. Enraged, she reached out and grabbed him by the chin, forcing him to look at her. I sacrificed. I bled. I cried. I did everything I could not to lay down and die. But I still did. And now it's gone. Who are you to ridicule me? You know nothing about me. I fought. You just hide. Like the coward you are. You just described a quarter of my life. His stoic gaze regarded her silently. By all means, continue. Your life couldn't have been that bad. My dear, you have no idea. Cinder spat at his feet in mild derision, but didn't refuse him when he began to wrap a fresh poultice around her waist. Her lone eye never left him, watching every moment until he finally completed his task. The moment he did, she tried to jerk away from him, only for him to seize her human hand in his. For a moment, just a moment, the tan flesh of his palm gleamed a ghastly white. She didn't have time to regret her decision. You think you know power. You think you could bear my burden and survive. You know nothing. The words escaped him in a low snarl as his fingers tightened around her heel. Salem. Grimm. Don't make me laugh. Look at me. White eyes regarded her with the weight of 1,000 worlds, and still, he didn't relent when she tried to squirm away. Look at me. His voice rose, crashed like thunder, rattling heaven and earth alike. Are you afraid? You should be. I could crush your master and lock her away in an instant, seal her in a place so cold and dark that she'd never see the light of day. Imagine what I could do to you. Her expression must have been telling, because he released her. Do you understand now? I could use this power. But I'd unleash something far worse on this world. Just like that, Naruto stepped back from her, the ghastly pallor fading from his visage like a bad dream, a faint memory. We all have our demons, Cinder. We all have our secrets. Mine are simply more tangible than most. When she opened her mouth reply, he staved her off with a raised hand. And you don't give yourself enough credit these days. You do have people who care about you. For instance, Cinder. As if waiting for that very moment, the door leading to the hut crashed open, spilling daylight into the darkened room. Cinder raised her arm to ward off the sudden surge of light, to no avail. Not a heartbeat later, a teary green and tan blur shot across the room to cannon into her chest. She recognized her supposed attack almost immediately, even as her body struggled between fight or flight. Emerald. But this, what, when, where, why? When the sage favored her with a dry look that spoke volumes, she wanted to burn him alive. But where had the girl come from? This didn't make a lick of sense. In the end, his smile answered her. I never said you were my only patient, the sage hummed. I'll leave the two of you alone, for now. Without so much as another word, he sketched a bow and departed the way she'd come. Cinder took back everything she'd thought of him. All of it. Every bit. This man was impossible. She couldn't understand him. While that brief display of power had certainly rattled her, it was his words that clung on, muddying the mire of her thoughts. He claimed to know the pain she felt, to know what she'd been through. It could be a trick. A ploy used to gain power over her. He held incredible power, but rather than use it as was his right, he kept himself sheltered away, eking out a living through these small, tiny acts of kindness. And he claimed to be content. No, she couldn't comprehend his motives. And yet now she almost wanted to, not for pride or power, but as a kindred spirit. More than that, she frowned, heart twisting quietly. No, surely not. It couldn't be. The very notion was absurd. And yet it still lingered. And there we go. Right then, explanations. Cinder wasn't the only one who had the tar beaten out of her back in Haven. Mercury, Emerald, Hazel, we all know they lost. It's heavily implied that Naruto's taking caring of the lot of them as they convalesce from their injuries. And if he helps them become better people for it, isn't that a good thing? On another note, our boy's quite capable of bringing back the dead via a certain jutsu that I'm sure we're all aware. Why, he could even bring a certain redhead back if he had the time, the means, and the inclination. Hell, if he ever met John and was asked, he'd probably do it. Grins. Has Cinder come around? Only time will tell. The fans seem divided. Surprised about Cinder's eye. Bah, we've seen stranger feats. Going to say it right now, in a straight-up fight. This incarnation of Naruto would butcher Salem. Unfortunately, any sort of engagement with her would all but guarantee Kagaya's release. And given what we've that one capable of, yeah. Salem is by far the lesser evil. Meanwhile, our boy's something of a village sage doctor, offering his services to those in need of bandit, huntsman and civilian alike while doing his best to stay off the grid and prevent himself from had a blast writing this chapter. So in the immortal words of Atlas. Review. Would you kindly? Here's a preview. Hope they warm your hearts. Preview. Trying to rob me. How novel. I offered you a place at my table. The cloak off my back. And you spat in my face. His eyes turned white. Right then, you're going to die now. Cinder witnessed something horrific in that instant. The poor, unwitting stranger who'd tried to take something from Naruto, did not die well. Yang. Look, up here. I'm flying. Ruby, get down from there. Mercury bared his teeth in a silent snarl. Are you going to try and fix me too, old man? A blonde brow arched upward. I don't fix people, son. It set him off. I'm not your son. Naruto barely blinked. I help them. Make yourself useful and fetch me some firewood, Hazel. A tan hand shooed him away. I'm trying to teach Emerald. How much? Naruto rolled his eyes. As much as those beefy arms can carry. Off with you now, shoo. Hazel grunted, but noticed what the girl failed to. For all her earlier objections, she was certainly listening now. The girl was even taking notes as Naruto explained new uses for her semblance. Hazel listened as well. Some of those uses were rather creative in scope. Not particularly destructive or violent, mind you, but creative. This might be good for her. Emerald was many things, but her world and views revolved around Cinder and by definition, shaped her as a person. Even he knew this was unhealthy. Girl needed some support in her life. So he lingered. And he listened. Now then, have you ever considered playing a prank on your metal-legged friend? I've never thought about using it that way. It's hard to keep up in combat. Naruto snorted. Why, my girl, you could be a prank queen. Hazel heard her giggle as he left the hut behind. Good, indeed. I had the pleasure of meeting the spring maiden, once. Cinder snorted. Of course you'd know that woman. Why am I not surprised? No, not Raven, though she is a bit of a regular. The blonde waved her words away and the alarm that came with them. I'm talking about the last incarnation. Poor girl. She stumbled upon my clinic in the dead of night. I told her not to go looking for those bandits. She didn't listen, and we both know how that wound up, don't we? Cinder silently seethed at the reminder, but she made no effort to release the purring kitten nestled in her lap. Naruto arched an eyebrow. Would you look at that? Seems that Sr. Pounce has taken a liking to you. You are not calling our cat that. You say. I wasn't aware you liked cats. Her cheeks turned red. Of course I don't. Idiot. Shut up. A gentle pace. She'd been had. Cinder realized it the moment she finally managed to pry Emerald off her chest. It didn't take long to put two and two together while she held the delighted girl at bay. Less so to see Mercury and Hazel poking their heads through the door her minion flung open. Naruto's satisfied smile only served to sanction her suspicions. All this time thought herself alone. Abandoned by her allies. One look at Emerald's bandaged forehead told her all she needed to know. They'd taken injuries of their own. Yet she hadn't seen them for days. Which in turn begged the question. Where were you hiding them? As I said, you're not my only patient. Naruto jerked a thumb over his shoulder as the men sauntered in. The burly one brought those two in for treatment shortly after I found you. Metal legs over here sustained broken ribs. Little Emerald here wasn't even able to walk until recently. When she thought you died, she overtaxed her semblance and nearly killed herself. His mismatching eyes narrowed upon her minion. Come to think of it, I believe I told her to stay in bed. Perhaps she misheard me. URK. The mint-haired girl wilted. Sorry, sir. A pause and then, thank you for giving Cinder back her eye. Sir. I told ya already. Don't go callin' me that. The doctor drawled as he glided towards the door. I'm not that old. Oi, gorilla. He said, addressing Hazel. We're going hunting. Gonna need more than a deer to feed this many mouths tonight. ... I have a name. The larger man sighed. Much to Cinder's dismay, he still capitulated and followed him out. So you do. Naruto laughed. Maybe I'll use it one day if you behave yourself. Now get over here. Cinder should have used their absence to escape. It was the most logical thing to do, really. Instead she processed the exchange numbly, her mind a whirl for entirely other reasons. Someone had nearly died for her. Emerald nearly died. For her. Why? She wasn't worth dying for. It was a foreign feeling. She wasn't sure if she was proud, touched, or furious. Proud to inspire such raw loyalty in those beneath her, touched that there was someone in this world who nearly threw their life away out of grief for her, or furious that so useful a tool of hers would allow themselves to be overcome by emotions. The girl's unique semblance was one of a kind, the sort that only came about once in a lifetime. Losing her would have proven to be a major setback to her future plans. Not that they mattered now. Salem wouldn't let them return until they redeemed themselves. Of course, her own emotions chose that moment to burn all treaties and go to war in Cinder's head. For a terrifying moment, she couldn't bring herself to move. Still, such selfless devotion deserved praise, in only to ensure further loyalty. She wasn't proud of the girl, she lied to herself. She wasn't. No, not at all. This was simply necessary. Her gaze snapped to Emerald and perhaps expecting punishment of some sort for what she no doubt viewed as a failure, the poor thing drooped even further. She felt like she'd just kicked an earnest puppy. Something in Cinder flinched, something that wouldn't have before. Stop. Don't look at me like I'm the center of your world. It was a weakness. Softness. Kindness. She had no need of either. Cinder knew this. Salem should have long since ground any such soft sentiment out of her. Yet she couldn't bring herself to quash this. She should chastise her. Condemn her for breaking down in a moment of crisis and failing to secure the relic. Punish her, at the very least. But the hope in the girl's eyes was almost too painful to behold. Emerald, she bade, the word a purr, come here. The girl did what she was bade. Ma'am, is what he said true? She demanded. Did you risk yourself for my sake? Instead of the relic. Mercury whistled somewhere in the background. Who, boy, she looks pissed. Emerald had never looked so small and tiny as she did in this moment when she nodded. Well, that settled things, didn't it? Her failure was complete. With her semblance, she could have stolen back the relic from those damn brats, or at the very least made things difficult for them in the face of her defeat. Instead she'd broken down, lost herself in her trauma, and flung her semblance at everyone with such force that she'd nearly killed herself. Nearly thrown her life away. Stupid girl. There could be only one answer for her foolishness. No matter what Naruto might say to her. Her hand descended. Emerald flinched aside with a wince, expecting a slap or worse. It never came. Bandaged fingers stroked her scalp gently, caressing the minty tresses of her hair as a mother would her child. Without thinking, the younger girl leaned into her touch. Just this once, Cinder allowed it. You did well, but never do that again. The words came out far softer than she intended. Don't throw your life away for me. She forced herself to smile. Good girl. Cinder realized her mistake instantly. Because rather than accept this precious piece of praise for what it was, Emerald reacted to it. Overreacted. She knew it by widening of her eyes, the way her minion went suddenly and terribly still under her hand. Let it not be said that Cinder didn't know the girl's tells. After all, they'd been working together for some years now. She wouldn't be much of a villain if she couldn't control or manipulate those beneath her, much less read them. And everything her newly restored sight told her. Nothing good. No, Emerald wouldn't. She couldn't. She didn't dare. She would, and she did. Cinder. A tan blue of green and brow cannoned into the former maiden's chest with enough force to physically flatten her back against the bed, pillows and all. It didn't so much hurt as it did startle her, because Emerald never did this. Never. Ever. She knew better. Now her wounds hissed angrily, as did Cinder, when the girl wrapped both arms around her and buried her head into her still healing collarbone shoulder. To make matters worse, she started sobbing. Weeping into her shoulder like some newborn babe. Ah, sentiment. It burned. I thought you were dead. She babbled into her shoulder, shaking her head to and fro. We all did. How did you survive? Cinder did not like being touched. Hugged. Even less so. She said as much. Get off. Emerald did so immediately, and Cinder stubbornly quashed another pang of guilt. Taking a moment to gather the shattered shards of her pride, the Blackett forced herself to sit up and straighten. Yes, she reminded herself. She was in control here. She set the pace. While that blonde buffoon was out, she could plot, she could plan, and find a way to get back into Salem's good graces. She might not have her maiden powers anymore, but she still held her wit and her skills. Her mind and her body remained her greatest weapons. They had served her in her weakest days, and it would serve her now. Her. Not this quack of a doctor. Mercury. Emerald. Her voice was still recovering, but it was enough to make her cohorts stand at attention. This man is a means to an end. She lied. Nothing more. Of course she lied. Do you understand? Why was she still lying? Do not get attached. Meh. No problem. Mercury shrugged. Don't much like the guy. Emerald almost looked, dare she say, conflicted. Yes, ma'am. I understand. Whipped. Mercury swiped at the air and made a cracking sound with his tongue. Emerald launched a pair of pillows at him from the bed, but the assassin nimbly dodged aside with taciturn ease. Enough, both of you. Cinder's voice may as well have been a whip the way it cracked at them. Did your semblance work on him? No, The green-haired girl confessed, realizing the question had been meant for her. He just laughed and told me to try harder next time. She flushed and turned aside, suddenly hesitant to speak. Well, what is it? Out with it, girl. He's been teaching me. The words tumbled out, startling her. Training, really? He said I have potential. Well, this was an unexpected development, but not an unfavorable one. Did he now? What are we going to do? Mercury inquired. Should I continue? For now, his earlier scare aside, she wasn't willing to test Naruto's patience. Not yet. Not when he displayed a power well above her own. Earlier she might have been willing to throw Hazel and her allies, she might be able to take him down. If she had her maiden powers, she was sure she could have put up a fight. But now, one glacé at the duo and that hope was dashed against the rocky shores of reality. He'd subverted them somehow, weakened their will to the cause, or perhaps he'd simply given them what they wanted. He had them wrapped around his finger. Just as he did her. And we're back. Just like that, the door to the hut crashed open. Mercury turned. Huh. That was awfully quick. How did you? That is a big fish. Cinder's gaze snapped away from her cohorts to see what Mercury was gibbering at this time. She soon had her answer as a large shape was hauled through. Oh, my. That was a rather large specimen. How had he caught something like that so swiftly? Gods, why did Hazel have an entire armful of the blasted things? Had they simply dove into the river to catch them? They weren't even wet. Fishing. No, it hadn't been long enough. More of Naruto's so-called magic at work. To catch 10 fish longer than her arm in as many minutes, that was absurd. To make matters worse, they weren't alone. There was a kitten following them. What the actual hell? What is that? It was a tawny, dirty little thing with bright green eyes, trotting after the two men without so much as a care in the world. Which was precisely why Cinder noticed it in the first place. There was not so much as a hint of fear in its posture. If anything, it looked perfectly at home here in the hut. Baffling. Animals were meant to fear humans. Yet this one pawed at Naruto's leg and mewed pitifully as he began to prepare their meal. Hazel and the rest were able to ignore it with ease, but her gaze still lingered all the same. She'd seen one just like it as a child. She remembered feeding it scraps. She wanted to pet it. The cat. Following her gaze, Naruto flicked a bit of fish at the tiny beast while he worked. It's just the village stray. Harmless. When it saw her, the little beast mewed and padded over to the foot of her bed. Kitty. Cinder's heart gave a painful girlish lurch at the sight, and her human hand reached out to pet it without thinking. She clamped down on it with her grim arm until the pain cleared her head. Naruto noticed immediately, if the impish gleam in his eyes gave any indication. Of course he did something about it. How could he not? In a plume of smoke, one that noticeably didn't make any of her allies jump, he left the meal prep to a doppelganger and stepped in to scoop the small feline up. Then he offered it to her. Here you go, he said. Cinder bristled. No, get it away. He read her bluff. You were trying to pet it just now. Was I? Cinder's voice turned coy. Whatever do you mean? A rare flash of anger crossed Naruto's visage. You're being difficult. As if to second this statement, the kitten made a pitiful meow in his grasp. Cinder's resolve began to tremble. It looked so small and helpless. No. Stay strong. Cease this foolishness. She rallied herself and looked away, spat. I don't want to touch it. Naruto arched an eyebrow. All right, then. I'm sure you wouldn't mind if I gave her to Emerald then. Mine. Cinder's human arm betrayed her just as her voice did. Sweeping forward to snatch the little hellion up before he or her minion could lay claim it. In a heartbeat she'd pulled it into her lap, curling her natural limb around it. Another had her stroking its coat. To make matters worse, the little creature started purring. Well, that tore it. She was lost. Blast it all. When had she come undone? In that moment she wanted nothing more than to bury her head in a pillow and pretend this never happened. Someone's scroll Mercury clicked in the background, immortalizing the moment forever, and her temper blazed. How dare he? This meant war. Emerald. Her word was a hiss. Ma'am. The younger girl stood rigid at attention. Aim for the head. It was a command, not a request. And she did. Mercury's terror was sweet music to her ears. And now hold on a second. Doctor or no, Naruto hadn't sworn any oaths. He stood idly by when Emerald flew at the assassin in a whirl of motion and summarily beat the tar out of him. Nor did he bat an eyelash when the wily woman snatched up his scroll in the chaos. Noticeably, she didn't break it. And if Cinder failed to notice, who was he to say anything? He had other plans. And if Cinder just so happened to be distracted by a kitten in the midst of it? Well, he wasn't about to say anything. Now then, he raised his voice to make himself heard. Did you want to continue with your lessons while we wait, Emerald? The girl perked up, pausing just long enough to glance at Cinder for acknowledgement. Make yourself useful and fetch some firewood, Hazel, she instructed the larger man. Dinner will be ready when you return. Damn him and his knowing smile. How much? Naruto rolled his eyes. As much as those beefy arms can carry. Off with you now, shoo. Hazel grunted, but noticed what the girl failed to. For all her earlier objections and plots, she was eager to sit down. Eager to listen. The girl was even taking notes as Naruto explained new uses for her semblance. Hazel listened as well. Some of those uses were rather creative in scope. Not particularly destructive or violent, mind you, but creative. This might be good for her. Emerald was many things, but her world and views revolved around Cinder and by definition, shaped her as a person. Even he knew this was unhealthy. Girl needed some support in her life. So he lingered, allowing a now bruised Mercury to bustle past him. And he listened. Hazel heard her giggle as he left the hut behind. Good, indeed. Right. Naruto continued under Cinder's watchful eye. We'll continue where we left off last time. You are the only limit to your semblance. He paused, brow quirking as the girl listened raptly. Your semblance is a part of you as much as you are it. Think of it as a muscle, one you need to strengthen. You define where it ends, you define what it affects, and you expend your stamina to maintain it. Unlike a genjutsu, you don't need seals or any genjutsu. Slip of the tongue, the blonde muttered. Ignore it. Cinder didn't. She filed the word away for later. Another piece of the puzzle. Now then, have you ever considered playing a prank on your metal-legged friend? Naruto inquired. I've never thought about using it that way. Emerald shook her head slowly. It's hard to keep up in combat, and if I use it on more than one person. Yes, the headaches. The whiskered warrior thumbed his chin. I believe that's merely a matter of stamina. Easily addressed, that. You just needed the right person to train you. When he thumbed a lone digit at his chest, it was all she could do not to roll her eyes. With the right motivation, well. A pale hand rose to scratch the back of his head. Let's just say your potential's kinda scary. Even for me. If you think of it as a field, you could even expand it from your body. Another laugh. Like I said, you're scary. Emerald preened at the ill-hidden praise. Scary, he'd said. She liked that. You think so? Naruto barked a laugh. Why, my girl, you could be a prank queen. Cinder observed them patiently as the minutes dragged on into an hour, then 2, 3, 4. All the while the sun sank lower in the sky. All the while she tried to ascertain his purpose and failed. Utterly. What did he gain from training Emerald like this? Her loyalty. Emerald would not be so easily swayed, was what she wanted to tell herself. But the girl's eyes were bright and keen on Naruto as he continued his lecture. Blast it. She didn't like this. Where were Hazel and Mercury? Were they dragging their feet? Had the authorities found them? Something was wrong here. Her shoulders tightened with tension, a thread of doubt weaving itself into her heart. I had the pleasure of meeting the Spring Maiden, once. Naruto said suddenly, jarring her from her reverie. Someone like you might have been enough to make her change her ways. Cinder snorted. Of course you'd know that woman. Why am I not surprised? No, not Raven, though she is a bit of a regular. The blonde waved her words away and the alarm that came with them. I'm talking about the last incarnation. Poor girl. She stumbled upon my clinic in the dead of night. I told her not to go looking for those bandits. She didn't listen, and we both know how that wound up, don't we? Cinder silently seethed at the reminder, but she made no effort to release the purring kitten nestled in her lap. Naruto arched an eyebrow. Would you look at that? Seems that Sr. Pounce has taken a liking to you. You are not calling our cat that. Weakness. Blast it. And he seized it, too. You say. His right eye gleamed. I wasn't aware you liked cats. Her cheeks turned red. Of course I don't. Idiot. Shut up. And the world shook. It wasn't so much a tremor as it was an explosion of noise and sound. One moment Cinder had been sitting of her bed, scowling at her host as her good legs swung lazily over the side. She was, well, not content, but neither could she call herself angry. In the next a vicious blast of something shattered her world, tore off the roof, and sent her tumbling to the floor. By some instinct, she'd managed to clutch the kitten to her brie and protect it, her aura did the rest. It didn't make her landing any less pleasant or humiliating. Emerald bolted upright. What in the world? Screams rippled outside, waves of fear and anger, the scent of fire and flames reaching Cinder's nose. She didn't need to see them to know the cause, just as she didn't need her former power to know what was about to transpire. Her darkened arm had already begun to ache long before she found her footing. She knew what it meant long before someone slammed through the door and started shouting for Naruto's presence. Grimm. Of course it would be them. It explained Mercury and Hazel's absence. As if things weren't bad enough. Did the gods hate her? Had she lost Salem's protection? She couldn't fight properly. Not with a bad leg, not with. Well, a familiar voice croaked, we were overdue for an attack anyway. Time to put those lessons into practice, Emerald. Naruto stood, catching her eye. Without thinking she grabbed at him. Where are you going? Mismatching eyes pulsed back at her. Thought that would be obvious. I'm going to work. Her minion hesitated, suddenly caught between the two of them. But Cinder will be fine. The blonde interjected. She's more than capable of killing whatever comes through this door. Without so much as a backward glance, he sauntered outside into the night. A moment passed. Then another. Somehow, despite all she'd seen and heard thus far, Cinder was still surprised when it was the Grimm who began screaming. The obligatory Grimm attack. Every story has one. Fight slaughter. More like. Next chapter. And there we go. We didn't get to see Team RWBY this time around for a reason, because Cinder still thinks she can turn this around. Poor Cinder. I wouldn't call this Naruto good. But I wouldn't go so far as to label him as evil either. At the end of the day, Naruto is still Naruto. He lives to help people, and through his life experiences his idea of saving the people around him has become a touch extreme. Be it through words or actions, or even something as simple as tending their wounds. Be ye good or evil, it doesn't matter. In his own words, he doesn't fix people. He helps them. Sometimes helping means healing. Sometimes healing entails a swift kick in the ass. Or murder. Depends on the day, really. He's taken it upon himself to help Cinder and her allies for now. Wonder how long that'll last. As ever, reviews keep this old man alive during this dark and crazy time. I ain't joking. Seriously, we're all locked away anyways these days, it's all that sustains me. So in the immortal words of Atlas. Review. Would you kindly and enjoy these previews? Remember those hints. Yes. No. Hope you paid attention. Because. Here. We. Go. Preview. Ruby inhaled. Exhaled. Raised crescent rose high, and the scythe's edge coated itself in red flame. When she tried again, lightning shot from her fingers. Ruby didn't cackle. Villains cackled. But she did giggle. Hero slapped a palm to his forehead. As if she wasn't dangerous enough. Like I said, you're not my old man. Mercury growled. I don't need anything from you. Oh, then I take it you wouldn't want your semblance back. Nope. I take it back. Best dad ever. Whatever you're doing to Cinder. Keep doing it. Naruto didn't look up from his book. Why? Whatever do you mean? Emerald turned scarlet. You know. She smiles now. Hugs me. Treats me like a daughter. He turned the page without so much as batting an eyelash. Good. She should. Much to his amusement, the teenager slapped a palm to her forehead. By the gods, you can be such a dad. A peal of bemused laughter startled her and caused her hands to clamp down over her mouth. Too late. She couldn't take the words back. Bemused eyes rose as the wily doctor took his hand from the pages of his journal to favor her with a dry look. Emerald opened her mouth to refute him, and it clicked shut thrice as fast. Huh. He'd fed her, clothed her, tended to her wounds, and listened to her words. Didn't parents do that? Hug. Naruto chuckled, not moving his arms an inch. No. Emerald shuddered. You're old. You're being a very bad daughter. Naruto. Raven jerked back as if she'd been burned. The hell is that? A hand settled on her shoulder from behind and the roving maiden jumped half a foot. So you found it. Naruto's voice hissed in her ear. Are you happy with yourself? You nosy little. You can bring back the dead. That is indeed what I said, Mr. Ark. Naruto nudged the revived squirrel with his foot, sending the restored creature skittering back into the brush. It's not something I do lightly. If everyone knew I could bring back their loved ones, I'd be swarmed. I'll have to ask you to refrain from speaking of this. Odd. With the way he spoke, this guy almost reminded him of Ozpin but older. Stranger. There was something ancient and unknowable in those gleaming blue eyes, as if standing in his presence would somehow impart the secrets to the universe or something. John didn't care about that. He'd latched onto those last few words with all the tenacity of an Ursa. Naruto's arm. More so. He'd thought they'd met by chance, that this was some random encounter in the dark but this must be fate. What else could it be? The words sprang to his lips. Could you? I could. But why? I don't know you. My means aren't perfect, nor is my eye. I require a sacrifice. John wilted when those mismatching eyes found his. Faltered. Is this a test or something? No. Use me. It should be me. No, I think not. The sage sniffed, causing the blonde to stumble. Though if there were a test, you just passed it. Do you have anything of hers? A piece of cloth, perhaps. Anything with her DNA. Are you ready? Ruby Rose inhaled deeply. Then she exhaled thrice as hard. Trembling fingers raised crescent rose. Silver eyes squinted against hazy moonlight. All right, she could do this. Crazy maiden powers. How bad could it be? She'd been training for days now, careful to keep her new tricks under wraps. Ozpin had been adamant on that. It wouldn't do for Salem to discover that she'd lost so useful a pawn, or so he claimed. For once Ruby was less than pleased with his advice. She didn't like being cooped up like this, treated like glass. Staying in Haven would give her some much-needed time to master her new abilities before they set out. And maybe not zap Weiss. No matter how funny that might have been the first time. All right. Breathe. Concentrate. Oh gods, her eyes are glowing again. Yang cried in faux despair. Duck and cover. Ruby made a keening noise. Stop it. That distraction cost her dearly as Ozpin's cane swooped at her face. She yelped and parried out of instinct if nothing else, only to find her scythe's edge coated itself in red flame. Oops. When she tried to parry again, her body betrayed her and lightning leapt from her fingers to strike her opponent in the chest. Ruby didn't cackle. Villains cackled. But she did giggle as Oscar's body tumbled backwards. It felt good to finally hit him for once. Even if have been an accident. This power was, well, try as she might, she didn't have a word for it, save that it felt alive. Alive, and eager for action. But still, victory. Ha, she crowed, pumping a fist. Got it this time. Well done, Miss Rose. She preened beneath Ozpin. He stood too straight to be Oscar in his gentle praise. Now, I believe you were interested in the practical applications of flight. Ruby squealed. Yes, please. Hero tipped his flask to his lips and bit back a sigh. As if she wasn't dangerous enough. He knew that maiden powers were a good thing. He just wished his niece wasn't the vessel for them. Damn it. Why did it have to be Ruby? If she wasn't a target before, she'd be one now. Salem would come howling for her head once she understood just how thoroughly she'd been played. Did Ruby realize that? Probably. Should he rain on her parade and wipe that smile from her face? Absolutely not. Hero was many things, but cruel wasn't one of them. She had her team. She had JNPR. She had him and Ozpin. She'd be safe. He'd make certain of it. He couldn't break his promise to Summer, even it cost him his life. Gods, he missed her. Somewhere in the distance, he thought he heard a Beowulf howl. Wait, was that a Beowulf? Grimm didn't laugh. Meh, someone was having a good time. 0.0.0.0. Naruto howled out a laugh as he ripped through another Grimm. Gods, this felt good. Wind in his face, pulse pounding in his ears, all the world a vivid whirl of color as the broken bodies of countless Grimm writhed and twisted around him. It made Naruto feel young again. Here and now, in the thrill of the moment, all his sins were forgotten, all his misdeeds and mistakes pushed to the wayside. He didn't have to think, didn't need to restrain himself. Grimm were mindless beasts, wholly devoid of logic or reason. There could be no bargaining with them, no talking them down from a fright, no sparing them. So he didn't. Instead, laughter leapt from his lips, laughter that didn't belong to him as he pounced upon a greater Ursa and viciously divested the beast of its head before turning to hurl its dissolving body into a pack of immature deathstalkers some yards away. Caught unprepared by the unorthodox missile, most of the gangly creatures were flattened beneath its bulk. Just as well. He flicked a pair of clones toward the stragglers and didn't spare the rest so much as a passing glance as he turned back to the fray. It was a fine night for a hunt. Strength surged back into his weary body as he fought on through the horde and rallied the people to him. Never in front of him, but behind him. Always behind him and out of harm's way, forcing the Grimm to focus on him and him alone. This village was no stranger to their kind. They'd fought them before and knew they would fight them again. He'd taught them well in his time among them. He wouldn't teach them about chakra. No, never chakra, but nearly every man, woman and child had their aura unlocked. Of that group, every adult knew how to fight. They had to. This far from Haven. Beset by bandits and Grimm alike, they'd learned to survive long ago. Somebody get me my bloody weapon. He barked the words into the chaos and sure enough, an axe sailed through the air to meet his waiting palm. A strange hybridization of a cleaver and saw alike, it was a weapon meant for one purpose and one alone, with a long handle and a curved blade that bent around said handle to make better use of centrifugal force. The staple of those who weren't quite huntsmen, but weren't civilians either. This was a crude and ugly tool, meant for one purpose. Rip and tear. The name he'd said instrument was apt, to say the least. Devil's rot. That tainted saw, coated in corrosive chakra, swung down neatly to bisect a Beowulf and slash through a larger Borbotusk skull when it rolled at him. Naruto grunted in satisfaction and chambered the switch at the base of the handle, causing the long edge to snap outward as he wielded it like a club. Grimm died in droves to its pointed teeth, felled by low cuts and hard blows. Those that didn't fell to his fists or his clones. Still, for every 10 he slew, more spilled from the trees and the sky to take their place. He tried to hold back, to avoid using chakra overmuch, lest it agitate his body, and his tenant within. Once upon a time, Naruto might have wondered what could have stirred so many Grimm up in such numbers, but he'd long since shed that foolish brick-headed ignorance. Now he knew the answer, just as his body knew the threat before him and responded accordingly. Instinctively. Call it the legacy of a misspent youth. Now, he tore another Beowulf in half and found an ashen-faced Mercury waiting for him on the other side. Well, good to know the little punk was still alive. They must have been drawn back by the fighting. Hazel likely wasn't far behind, judging by the furious roar somewhere behind him. But still, the silver-haired teen continued to gape at him. What the hell are you? He rasped. Naruto blew out a breath. Complicated, he thought. Instead, he laid a hand on Mercury's shoulder. Are you all right? An angry Beowulf lunged at them and he eviscerated its jaw with his free hand. I'm fine. Stop that. You're not my old man. The teen growled and shook his other arm off. I don't need anything from you. The ancient shinobi bit back the urge to roll his eyes. Good lord, the Grimm were attacking and the boy was trying to be edgy. Sasuke would have laughed at him. Still, he could see the problem readily enough. His altered eye told him all he needed to know about the boy. Aura was the soul, and this boy had his all but ripped away when his semblance was sealed. Not stolen, sealed. It was still there. He could see that tiny ember beating in the boy's chest. It had always been there. Really, the remedy was obvious. He just had to wake it up again. He'd done it once before. It would be the work of moments, and perhaps a way to push the boy back onto the right path. Oh, so he let a slow, sleepy smile dawn on his whiskered cheeks. Then I take it you wouldn't want your semblance back. Mercury's jaw clicked shut in childish defiance. Bullshit. You can't do that. No one can. Was that a challenge? Naruto seized him before he could protest. For it is in time that we find our meaning. One hand alighted on the boy's forehead and the other touched his chest as a faint silver glow suffused his form. Through healing that we preserve others. Through words we save the world. He intoned the words rapidly as the world burned around them. Through kindness we preserve the bonds we hold dear. Mercury black. For a fleeting instant, his eyes burned white. I awaken your soul once more and by my words unshackle thee. He released him and the assassin jerked back as if he'd been slapped, gaping at his hands as though he'd grown extra fingers. How? What did you just do? I gave you back your semblance. Naruto prodded his chest with a finger. You never lost it. It was just asleep. I woke it up again. ... I know. The boy balked at him, eyes flitting to his palms. I can feel it. It's there. My old man never stole it. Naruto shrugged awkwardly. Doesn't seem like it. For a fleeting instant, the boy looked lost. What do I do now? Oh, for the love of. He was asking that question. Here, now. He pushed him forward. Fight. You know what? A small, sly grin tugged at the corner of Mercury's mouth. I take it back. Best dad ever. Naruto clutched his black heart and nearly keeled backward. Sticks and stones could break a man's bones, but those words. Critical damage. Dad. URK. He'd never been called that before. For all his poking and prodding of Salem's minions, he hadn't expected one of them to crumble this fast, least of all to call him that. And didn't that just make him feel old as dirt? Even if he didn't look it. Still, it was not an unpleasant feeling. So he slapped his shoulder and sent him on his way. Go get him, kid. To his credit, the assassin recovered quickly from his brief lapse and spun back into the melee with a smirk. Naruto almost pitied the Beowulf he fell upon. Mercury's semblance was a powerful piece of work. The more hits he landed on an opponent, the more damage he did. Fitting for one who knew his trade. Naruto let him fight, content in the knowledge that he could look after himself. Good kid. Bit fucked up in the head and all, nothing he couldn't fix given time. But now was the time for fighting, not fixing. Still, an amusing thought niggled at him. Did I just adopt a criminal? He wondered. Feels kinda nice. He punted a Borbatusk that tried to barrel into him and waded in where the Grimm were the thickest. Yet no matter how many he hacked and slashed, more kept coming, drawn to him like a beacon. It was always like this. Grimm would inevitably focus on him to the exclusion of all else. His passenger guaranteed that. Even sealed, Kagaya was a blight upon him. Her very presence radiated negativity, more so when he fought. Still, it was a bit unusual for so large a swarm to strike in the dead of oops. Something slapped against his back and he plucked a nevermore from his shoulder. Sloppy work. Really? He asked of the squawking bird as it flailed in his grasp. What did you think this would accomplish? It shot a nasty caw at him and he broke the creature's neck without a second thought. A shadow fell over him a heartbeat later, blotting out the moonlight. Mismatching eyes of sapphire and violet rose to meet mindless red ones. Despite himself, despite knowing it was futile, Naruto still smiled. I don't suppose we could talk about this. Twin fists descended on his skull, only to stop short against the biting edge of Devil's Rot. Burringle were not quiet creatures. He'd heard the ape coming ages ago, nor was Grimm flesh a match for the chakra of a tainted god. Tan fingers flicked out before the beast could try pound him to paste between its meaty fists again. Devil's Rot slipped between its legs and the Grimm's legs buckled, leaving it to crumple with a whimper. His weapon took it high and hard in the throat, cutting its yelp into a pitiful hiss. See, that's not very nice. Naruto hummed over its tortured shrieks. You're gonna make me angry at this rate. His gaze narrowed. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. Yet another Ursa lunged at him while he dispatched it. One of his clones must have missed it among the others. He snagged its paw in passing with his free hand and tore it free. In that same movement he took that great burly limb and ruthlessly rammed it through the belly of the beast. It didn't even have a chance to feel the pain. His right hand slammed forward and smashed a Rasengan through its skull. It was still dissolving when a large Beowulf bounded through its remains to tackle him in a shadowy blur. On a whim, he decided to pit his strength against the beast. Less so the rest of the pack that dog piled onto him. Persistent bastards. In another life, he would have been crushed under their weight. Now, he merely snorted and raised a hand. Almighty push. A rolling wave of concussive force exploded from Naruto's palm to dash the Grimm against one another, grinding them to sullen dust. Somehow, one of the larger ones managed to survive. Annoyed, he climbed to his feet and reached out again, yanking it towards him with a divine pull. To its credit, the beast actually managed to bite him before he grabbed it. Slavering jaws crunched down on his chest, tearing through flesh and bone. A human would have died. Naruto had no heart left to pierce, no lungs to sunder, and so only clicked his tongue in mild admonishment of himself as much as the beast as he snatched it up by the throat, prying its jaws free from his chest. Uncaring of the holes left behind. Its confused gurgle was sweet, sweet music to his ears. Their confusion never got old. Something dark in him fed on their fear. He thought he heard Emerald gasp somewhere behind him, but he paid her no mind. Unused to being overpowered, the Beowulf went wild in his grasp, limbs flailing to tear great bloody furrows in his face and throat. Blood stained White Claw's red, but he barely felt the wounds. Pain was an old friend these days. They'd already closed by the time the beast reared for a second strike. He never gave it a chance to finish what it started. Bad dog. Naruto admonished, tightening his grip on the Grimm's jugular. You should know better. It slashed weakly at him again. That mighty roar withered to a whine then a whimper as he crushed its windpipe. Red eyes bulged in abject horror as he tossed it into the air and caught it by the leg, hefting all 7 feet of it like a crude flail. This time, Naruto wasn't able to keep the smile from his face. He was losing control, sliding down a slippery slope from which there might be no coming back. He knew it, but in that moment he couldn't bring himself to care. His blood was up, so much anger, so much fear. Come on, then. The words tore out of him in a roar. Who wants some? A pack of Burringle accepted his challenge and barreled towards him. For all its intelligence, his captive Beowulf couldn't do anything more than squeak when he bashed it against them. Naruto cackled again and smashed it against another Grimm, flattening an unlucky Ursa beneath its bulk as if it were no more than a cub. Beating one bastard with another bastard. Huh. He was sure there was a pun to be had there somewhere, but he couldn't think of one. He was too busy laughing, didn't even realize that his impromptu weapon had expired until he realized he was fighting with his hands again. Casting its crumbing corpse aside, he snatched up his weapon and bounded back into the fray. Violence was so uncivilized, but he recognized it as a necessary evil. After all, you couldn't barter with the Grimm. But as much as he might loathe it, someone savored the bloodshed. Even now he could hear Kagaya singing in the back of his head, cackling at the carnage as he crushed every Grimm before him. One managed to swat his weapon out of his hand, leaving him to fight on with his fists. All the while, the rabbit goddess laughed at him. At herself. At everyone. She wasn't even sane anymore, just a writhing mass of power, of hateful envy, sloth, greed, and lust every sin made manifest. Of course she enjoyed this. Her presence made him nearly indestructible and she fed off every life he took. Naruto missed a step as a spike of red-hot agony shoved itself through his temple. Damn it. Not now. Yes, now. Her silken voice cried in the back of his head. Hack and slash. Rip and tear. Kill them. Kill them all. Kill. Her childish enthusiasm for the slaughter sickened him and his thoughts turned inward as he fought on. Even as a brutish Burringle burst when he flung a recentrican at it. Not enough. He wanted to tear them apart. No. Calm thoughts. He couldn't afford to rile her up over much, lest he lose control of himself. Even now he was nearly drunk on her chakra. It burned through his veins, hot and heady, demanding a release, so he did the next best thing. If she wanted a chance to vent, he'd give her one, just not in the way she intended. A simple crossing of his hands flooded the village with more shadow clones. They appeared everywhere, some alighted atop buildings, others in the trees, still more crouched with weapons in hand. For a fleeting instant everything froze, even the Grimm themselves, startled by the sudden influx of bodies. Hundreds of them. Naruto felt his smile twist into something monstrous as everyone gaped at him, human and monster alike. Even his allies. Ants. They were all ants to be crushed and no. He stubbornly tamped it down and blew out an angry breath. He wouldn't lose control. He refused. Time wrap things up, boys. His voice boomed at the lot of them. Go. Protect the people. With that simple act, the battle was all but won. He fought on, tracking any strays that tried to break away from the flood of death he'd just unleashed. It was all he could do. He'd come to this world to hide, not to hurt. To seal himself away, and when that had failed, eke out a humble existence on his own. Even healing came as a whim. He'd used his talents to help someone on death's door, just once, and word spread. People found him. Soon enough, this village sprang up around him over time as supplicants came to him, one he found himself tasked with protecting. It wasn't always would be a far cry from Hokage, but living here made him happy. And now he rained death on those that would harm his precious piece of paradise. Mercury and Hazel gaped at him as a rampaging herd of Goliath went down with an anguished wail. Mighty trunks flailing as their bodies were swarmed by a raging river of doppelgangers. Emerald poked her head out just in time to see flocks of manticores die in droves as a hail fireballs sent them tumbling from the sky. Cinder was given the express pleasure of watching the forest come to life around her, of seeing giant griffins crash to the ground as the very earth betrayed them, roots leaping up to snag the beasts from the sky and drag them screaming into the mud, never to be seen again. And just like that, the world went silent. It took Naruto a handful of seconds to realize that the Grimm incursion had been stymied. That the battle was done and people were looking to him for guidance. Guidance. Ha! Bitterness bubbled up inside of him as he felt his fingers twitch traitorously at his sides. One hand descended on his scalp, pushing down the horns he'd felt growing for the better part of 5 minutes now. Kagaya's horns. Those ghastly red things resisted him despite his best attempts, so he snapped them off in a fit of pique. More. Kagaya cried in his head. No, it was time to stop. Any more than this and he really would lose control. Blowing out a breath, he bled his tension away and forced himself to face his people. There were bodies, of course. There were always bodies. It didn't matter. He wouldn't let them die of anything less than natural causes, and if someone did, he'd correct that mistake. They knew that. They trusted him. Death held no meaning to any of these people. Why should it? People. Because they didn't comprehend the cost. With every soul he snatched back from death, he felt a little more of himself slip away. Didn't matter. Their lives mattered more than his. He was content to fade away if it meant dragging Kagaya to the void alongside him. You all fought well. He congratulated each of them. Bring the wounded to me, and all. You're hurt. Emerald's words and her hands on his arm when had she gotten that close, brought him up short. Shit. Mercury hissed, and just like that, the blonde found himself cornered. That doesn't look good. Trust me, I'd know. Frowning at their pointed concern as much as his own irritation, the ancient shinobi glanced past those concerned eyes and stole a glance at his ruined coat. Saw the still mending wounds in his torso. Oh, no wonder they were concerned. That looked grisly. Even now he could hints of white bone of his ribs peeking through the muscle. Must have expended more energy than he thought if he hadn't recovered yet. The thought brought with it an feeling, an almost childish pang of concern. Nonsense. He would recover. He always healed. He always did. It was his curse. It doesn't matter. And it didn't, not in the grand scheme of things. He turned away from her. As I said, bring the wounded. Emerald recoiled, incredulously. You're the one who's wounded. How are you still standing? Because I must. Naruto frowned at her. If not him, who would? He expected them to simply back down, that this would be the end of their argument. It wasn't. Sure enough, the two teenagers pursed their lips and stepped away, but even as they did so, Naruto heard an all too familiar snarl sunder the air behind him. A lifetime ago, he would have given a groan and palmed his face. Now, he merely rolled his eyes when an arm of darkest shadows closed around his left wrist to reel him in. He could have removed said arm in any number of ways, could have killed its owner in an instant. He chose not to, and weathered the tirade that followed with stoic patience. You absolute buffoon, Cinder. He sighed, turning to stare into angry amber eyes. You shouldn't be out of bed. She really shouldn't be, but when had common sense prevailed her before? Still, she stood before him. Even then she looked as though she might topple over at the slightest breeze. Her lovely visage was pale and slicked with sweat, and though she'd managed to find her red dress and climb back into it, it couldn't disguise the way she held herself. Her gait was clearly off, body poised awkwardly on her good leg, and she all but clung to him for balance, yet her gaze blazed in singular fury. Enough. What is wrong with you? How can you be so broken inside? Broken. The word stabbed at him, drawing a scowl to whiskered cheeks. If my sacrifice saves others, then I'm more than willing to take a few wounds. Her human hand cracked across Naruto's face in a devastating slap, jerking his head to the side. Anger blazed, anger he tried to stifle as he raised a tan palm to his throbbing cheek. The blow didn't hurt, didn't even sting really, but the gesture behind it all but smacked of contempt. It surprised him, but also made him proud. Such a strange emotion. Pride in someone else. Unfortunately, it was overshadowed by Kagaya's unyielding rage. It took all he had to restrain himself. Why did you just slap me? You idiot. The words were a hiss. Are you trying to die? I cannot die. He'd meant to state it as a fact, but her expression turned thunderous. There's no need to concern yourself with my safety. She tried to slap him again. This time he caught her wrist. Stop that. He warned, the words pitching into a growl. I'm not just going to stand there and take it. You save so many lives, then say that your own is worth nothing. Her grim hand stabbed into his chest, pushing him back half a pace. All with that damn smile on your face. Had he upset her somehow? Gods, women baffled him. What's wrong with smiling? Everything. It was the worst thing he could have said. Because Cinder reared back with a hiss. He let her go, releasing her wrist. She stumbled, nearly fell before she caught herself. His hand nearly reached out for hers, but she stood on her own two legs, ignoring the pain even now lancing through her leg. She was strong. Even here at her weakest, he suspected she'd sooner spit than accept his help. Why was she so riled up? In his mind, he hadn't done anything wrong. Cinder clearly believed he had. You exist. She jabbed him again, drawing a scowl a blink when her finger thrust itself against his nose. You have meaning. Worth. Look at you. Now you're cry for those you've slain. Crying. Naruto squinted and touched a hand to his face again, realizing his eyes were in fact damp. He wasn't crying. That was all Kagaya, the spiteful bitch. Damn her. Damn them. Something ugly reared inside his heart once more, slipping through his grasp before he could control it. Who was she to judge him? He'd taken her and her cohorts in without a second thought, tended their wounds and nursed them back to health. And she dared to question his methods. To berate him in her fallacy. Did she think he'd wanted this? Kagaya. Any of this? No. Cinder felt the pressure a heartbeat before it hit, in that she managed to steady herself in time. It didn't help. She knew she'd made a mistake, but she was too angry to care. You little fool, Naruto swore softly, shaking his head fro side to side, hair swaying in the wind. Something in his voice made her flinch. It sounded different, colder, older. I won't shed any tears for the Grimm. Not them. Never them. They're not worth it. It's just, sometimes I forget what I used to be. A small, bitter chuckle tumbled out of his lips. Who I used to be. It's funny, you know. As she looked on, he palmed his face. I try to bury myself in my work. Help people. Heal them. But sometimes I remember, and knowing once I was not this. Not what? She challenged, anger still seething in her veins. A fool. White eyes regarded her and she recoiled. This fucking thing. Suddenly he was in her face, snarling at her, veins throbbing in his eyes. This monster. Look at me. I said look at me. He grabbed her chin when she turned away from him, forcing her to meet his gaze. I used to be a man, Cinder. I used to be alive. Who are you to question me and my methods? Where would you be without me? Well, she opened her mouth to snap at him and his fury ignited tenfold. Cold. Dead. Forgotten. I shaved away a piece of my soul to bring you back, not have you act like. He expected anger. Defiance at the least. Not the gasp. You did what? Damneedle. He hadn't meant to say that. Her reaction drained the anger right out of him as surely as a broken sieve. He stepped backward, ashamed of his outburst. She tried to follow him, but her leg finally buckled and in a moment of weakness Naruto found himself moving in to catch her. She fought him like a hellcat, writhing and thrashing in his grasp the moment his hands touched hers. Let go of me, Blast you. Sorry. He grumbled, tearing his gaze from hers. It was a slip. Don't worry. It won't happen again. Bumbling oaf. Cinder was spitting sparks when he finally released his hold on her. You, arg. What am I do to with you? Kiss me, he teased, falling back on their old routine. Deny. Don't speak of anything else. It was the one thing he knew she'd never do. Her human hand snapped up to seize a fistful of his hair and he realized what Cinder was about to do. She was well and truly furious with him now, her blood still up from the attack. She wasn't thinking rationally. Neither was he. Perhaps, had Naruto been in his right mind, he would have anticipated her ambush and reacted accordingly. He'd underestimated her. With a low hiss that sounded entirely too much like a snake, Cinder pushed herself up on her good leg and rammed her mouth against his even as she dragged his face down to hers. It was quick, rough, forceful. She bit his lower lip with enough force to draw blood, her tongue ruthlessly plundering his mouth like a sunken galleon before jerking away thrice as fast. Before he could even think to speak, she released him. Eyes of molten gold glowered defiantly up at him. Then her hands came up on his chest and cannoned out with impressive force. Oomph. It was a very good push, all things considered. It struck him dead in the ribs and knocked him right on his ass with a startled squawk. He allowed it, too stunned to do anything else. Emerald squeaked. Mercury made an irritated noise that sounded vaguely ill, until a shit-eating grin spread across his face. Naruto knew it all too well, if only because he'd worn the same smile in his youth during his pranks. No, surely he wouldn't. Oh, who was he kidding? Of course he would. He had an inkling of what the young assassin was about to say and made no effort to stop him. Yup. That settled it. Favorite kid. Ah, mommy and daddy finally made up. Emerald went red. Cinder choked. What? Hazel actually chuckled. Naruto wasn't far behind him, though his laughter proved louder and more raucous by far. Women. He'd never understand them. Though she didn't answer, her silence lifted a weight from him. Her sullen squawking and sputtering were all the response he needed. It lifted his spirits in a way he hadn't thought possible. Oh gods, he'd needed this. Never had he needed something so badly and never known until he received it. Try as he might, he couldn't hold himself back, nor did he make any effort to rise. It left him shaking and cackling in the dirt, all his anger forgotten. Fuck off and die, the lot of you. Cinder spat at them. See if I care. HMMPH. Without another word, she marched back to her hut. Bastards and brats, all of them. Damn them all. 0.0.0.0. Salem was many things. Calculating. Charismatic. Cold. But she was also patient. Terribly patient. When the deck was stacked against her, when she found herself in an unfavorable situation, she often chose to wait. Outlast her enemies. Time was her ally in all things. When you were immortal, eternal, everlasting, years ceased to have any meaning for one such as her. A day was but the blink of an eye. A year, mild inconvenience. She'd once waited decades before making her move. She'd had countless minions over the years, but her Grimm. There were always more to be had. She could see through every creature she created. It was both a blessing and a curse, albeit one she rarely used. She but willed it. She could have eyes in any one of the four kingdoms, but only in one hemisphere at any given time. For instance, she couldn't see through an Ursa in Vacua while gazing through the eyes of a Nevermore somewhere in Mistral. Her powers were many, her skills great, but her focus could not be in two places at once, no matter how much she might wish it otherwise. And speaking of wishes, she just happened to glance a most familiar figure just now. Now whatever was her sweet little Cinder doing in a rundown village like that?